This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
All right, game day on WST. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Jets looking to get back in the win column. Well, and actually score a goal tonight coming out of the break after being shut out by the Pittsburgh Penguins on Tuesday. They are in Philadelphia tonight. We will be talking lots of Jets today as we get ready for the game this evening. Murat from The Athletic coming up a little later on. And an absolutely great segment coming up with Craig Button that I know you're going to enjoy. It is Thursday. We'll also hook up with our friends at Sport Manitoba with another It Takes a Community to Play segment a little bit later on. Brought to you in part by Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. We got to get to the Brenden Dillon suspension, which we will do as well. And hit the Coolbet lines a little bit later on. Just finished up a fun lock shop. Dusty and the fellas at Edmonton Sports Talk spending the last 3 days in Vegas for Super Bowl week. And, of course, that Oilers Knights game earlier this week. Check that out. And tomorrow's lock shop at noon is going to be the big one with all of our favorite prop bets and everything Super Bowl related for the big game on Sunday. Just before we bring in Michael Remis and get going, a big thanks to the sponsors that make the show happen every day. Our friends at Coolbet, of course, Princess Auto, the Winnipeg Jets and Little Brown Jug, Aitken's Lake Wilderness Lodge, Sport Manitoba, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Canadian Club Whiskey, Manitoba Battery, and Modern Man Barbershops. And we will get to a why not question of the day a little bit later on as we get into our Jets content. Let's get the show on the road. Shout out to everyone joining us in chat right off the top. Michael Remis, what's going on? How are you?
I'm feeling good. Another Jets hockey game tonight. Yes, hopefully we can see a goal. And also Super Bowl week. So it's feeling a little festive, Hustler. I'm in a good mood. And I don't know, there's weather too. Like, looking outside, there's no snow on the ground. What's going on here? But I mean, I'm feeling good.
I just looked out onto the river, and it's like pooling out there. I guess there's no, like, is the river trail still functioning right now? I know they opened it up, and then it got wet and warm. I don't think there's any chance it's going to be extending where it normally does out by my spot. I guess there is this Colorado low coming as well. I don't know how much we're going to get it in the city, and it is going to get a little bit cooler, which I know some people will be happy about. I mean, honestly, selfishly, I've been loving the fact that it's been so warm. But it does look like we'll get to more seasonal temperatures beginning tomorrow with a high of -8. But yeah, today it's just periods of drizzle, if you can believe that, 1 degree above Celsius, and then sort of, negative temperatures, but, more closer to -10 than 0 for the next week or so. But let's get right to it. I mean, the big news last night, we were waiting for it. We thought it might break during the show. They waited till into the early evening to drop it. Brenden Dillon gets suspended for 3 games. And again, I'm sure you're locked and loaded to talk about this as well, Remis. I'm surprised. I thought that was a little excessive considering what the hit was. I realize it was contact with the head. It looked bad with the guy's helmet flying up in the air and him having to leave the game for a little while. But as we've gone through this play over and over again, I'm really not too sure what Brenden Dillon could have done to avoid it. And listen, if you're given 3 games for hits like that all year long, I think people can handle it. But, as we're going to talk to Craig Button about a little bit later on, there have been so many other plays that have, never mind not suspended, have gone unpenalized in games that I think would be, on the level of the Dillon hit last night. So, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that player safety has it out for Winnipeg, or they use a team like Winnipeg to make their examples. I know there's still a lot of people that feel about that way about the Scheifele hit in the playoffs against Jake Evans a few years back. But I'll tell you what, I was thinking it would probably more likely be 1 than 2. So count me in the surprise category that Brenden Dillon's out for 3 games.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised it was 3. He already got basically 1 from the match penalty, so that makes it a 4-game suspension. And Mike McIntyre tweeting out, if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you have to be confused, because I would say that was a hockey play. And, Kyle Connor got injured on a knee-on-knee hockey play earlier this year, and there was a 5-minute penalty to Strome on Anaheim, but there was no supplemented discipline there, and Connor was out for a number of weeks. Cole Perfetti was the recipient of an intentional slash to the face by Ryan Hartman. Thankfully, because Hartman is just so accurate at slashing guys in the face, it could have been much worse. And thankfully, he didn't have an injury, but Hartman just got a fine. So what I've learned here, Hustler, is if Brenden Dillon wanted to avoid a suspension, should have stuck his knee out on Achari, or just wound up and slashed him in the face, and he would have avoided suspension. That is what he should have done, according to player safety. Case closed there, but in all seriousness, you look at some other checks to the head that were suspended. Connor Clifton had one earlier this year, and Brett Howden. And I thought those were similar. Those were 2-gamers. The ones that were more was the Gallagher elbow, and that was a clear elbow, and there was one more.
That was a chicken wing.
Yes.
I mean, you want to talk about predatory hits and predatory play. That was textbook. And I mean, we said it right there. I was stunned that wasn't an in-person hearing.
Yep.
To give them the ability to suspend for more 5 games. They didn't even go that way. They gave them the 5 once they finished the phone call. But for Dillon to get 3, I mean, Zucker got 3. With that hit on Nick Cousins. Now, to be honest, I think there's a lot of people that felt like Zucker maybe should have got a pass a little bit because it was a clear retaliation. I guess NHL player safety doesn't want clear retaliation. But for what Nick Cousins, known rat himself, did just moments before. But, I mean, that was drilled shoulder into the numbers, head into the glass of a guy that wasn't even looking. To compare that to what happened yesterday, on Tuesday, which absolutely was a hockey play. There was no elbow. There was no leaving of the feet. I don't know. I think, I think this was a lot more than a lot of people around here, and I'm sure a lot of people in the Jets organization felt that NHL player safety was going to dole out. Yeah, it was definitely a bit more, and again, the McAvoy got suspended for a headshot 4 games on Oliver Ekman-Larsson. These were, I thought, intent headshots. This seemed like a guy who just stood there and Chari just ran into him. I didn't think it was a lot of intent. I didn't think he had used excessive force, but the visual of the helmet flying up, I think that added an extra game if you thought it was going to be 2 games. Yeah. I don't know. It is strange. Like you go back to the Brendan Smith hit on Connor Bedard. I mean, broke his jaw. Last time I checked, a jaw was part of your head, and that didn't get anything. And the response on that one was, kid's got to learn to keep his head up going down the middle from his coach. So that's why I think it was so torn. And we mentioned, John Buccigross from ESPN, Mark Spector from Sportsnet, former NHLers Brent Sopel and Rob Schremp on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying, that they thought it was clean. And I don't know, I guess Dillon could have gone from the side more, but he's trying to line him up shoulder to chest, and the guy's bent over, and it's a quick, we're analyzing these in super slow motion. It's a quick game. Things happen fast. And I don't think Dillon is a dirty player. I don't think he tried to take his head off. I think if he wanted to, it would have been much worse. So Achari he didn't practice today. He had a concussion. So, disappointing for the Jets. He's out for 3 games, and we're kind of left wondering about player safety because you just don't know what to say. I'm all for eliminating hits to the head,
but it just seems like the rule is not getting applied consistently. And that's because I feel like an asshole come out here saying, oh, he shouldn't get suspended when this guy has got a concussion and, could have long-term implications from that. But we're just trying to say, apply the rules consistently here, and they just aren't, and everyone knows it.
Yeah, I mean, again, we could probably, beat this to death and talk about it for a long time, but, it's not really different than a number of other conversations we've had, except for the fact that this is involving a member of the Winnipeg Jets, and now Brenden Dillon, who's been such a workhorse in the top four, will not be available to the club for this game tonight in Philly. So let's get to how things look without Brenden Dillon in the lineup. Morrissey and DeMello will play together. Dylan Sandberg is going to move up to play alongside Neil Pionk on the Hermantown connection. Nate Schmidt will maintain his spot on the third pair, and it's Logan Stanley that gets in. Now, Logan Stanley, the only defenseman, the only extra defenseman with the Winnipeg Jets right now on the current roster, with Declan Chisholm being picked up off waivers last week by the Minnesota Wild. But, of course, Remis, the big conversation online and amongst many Winnipeg Jet fans is what this might mean for an opportunity for Ville Heinola. And Bones had said yesterday that they would go into this game with Logan Stanley in the mix. I'm not sure if it'll depend on how Stan plays and how the team does tonight, but you'd have to think that there is consideration of adding Ville Heinola to the mix, although it will mean that they would have to, put a player like Dominic Toninato on waivers if they did make that move. If they wanted to add him to the roster to potentially get in a couple games beginning on Saturday night against the Pittsburgh Penguins here in Winnipeg, if they want to give Ville a chance to get a look and get back into NHL games.
Yeah, listening to Scott Arniel today, he hinted that Logan Stanley is going to get a look for the next 3 games. So all those Ville stands out there, fans of Ville Heinola, maybe hold your breath. And I talk about Nintendo Ice Hockey a lot, and Dylan, he would be a fat guy in Nintendo Ice Hockey, and they want to. Sorry, Brett. Not saying he's fat, but he's
big guy.
He's a big guy, and Logan Stanley is also a big guy. So I think the Jets see that as a replacement. You don't replace a big guy with a skinny guy. I don't know. I think they want to maintain the ratio of skinny, big, medium guys on their defense. I'm not
sure that all NHL teams use your Nintendo Ice Hockey series, though, for a Jets spot. Well, you know what? But maybe you're onto something. I mean, and I think back to what Paul Maurice said over and over again, and Rick Bowness has said this as well. It is about roles. And listen, the role Logan Stanley is going to play on that third pairing is going to be probably playing some sheltered minutes. And probably, getting some time on the PK. Listen, if you're asking me, would I like to see Ville Heinola over the next 3 games? The answer is absolutely yes. And I will say for the record right now, Ville will get a call up at some point, and Ville will get games towards the end of the season, because I do think that he'll get the opportunity to go into the lineup, potentially at the expense of a healthy Nate Schmidt, even despite the fact that Schmidt's played very well and really sort of solidified his spot in the lineup, to see if he brings more. And I mean, the one thing that sometimes is lost on maybe some of the online conversation is just, how great defensively this team has been all year long with the guys that have been in the roster or been, in the lineup. And we haven't heard a lot of complaining about Nate Schmidt for the last couple months, frankly, because he's been getting the job done. I know he makes a lot of money. There's nothing anyone can do about that. But I will say this. If Stanley struggles tonight, and listen, I don't know when the last time he played was. It was probably about 2 months ago. I mean, it certainly isn't an easy position just to come in from 2 months in the press box and play. But guess what? This is pro sports, and you have a guy that by all accounts made the team with this same coaching staff at the beginning of the year, got injured, was out for 2 or 3 months, and is now playing at a pretty high level with the Manitoba Moose. So Logan Stanley better make the most of his opportunity, I guess is what I'm saying. And hopefully, one way or the other, the team can get back to their winning ways. And listen, this is a lot about goal scoring and a lot about getting back into, into some good feelings offensively. I don't know whether Logan Stanley's going to do much offensively. And I think you could make the argument, Remis, that with the team that is having a tough time scoring goals and on the power play, that Ville Heinola might be a better choice, at least coming into the second and third game of it. But I do have a feeling that they feel that Stan has played the good soldier like Declan Chisholm did. No one got hurt. No one played themselves out of the lineup. So he'd waited for his opportunity for a long time, and he's going to get it tonight. I guess the other side of that conversation is, maybe there's an opportunity for Stan to go have a few good games. Maybe that helps him be more of a trade chip for the Winnipeg Jets that I don't think come playoff time, barring a number of injuries, would expect to have Logan Stanley in the lineup.
Yeah, and I almost wonder too, if they could have used a guy like Declan Chisholm, if he would have maybe seen an opportunity, or Stan was just ahead of him on the depth chart. I mean, that's why he went on waivers. So
I don't know. I mean, I think back. I mean, Chisholm got in first, I believe, when those guys had been out for a long time. And again, that's 2 months ago. So, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes in practice. When you're talking about a 7th and 8th defenseman, who's going to go in first, that we don't see, that we don't really talk about, that we don't hear from the coaching staff. But to your original point, I mean, there is an element of the role that players are missing out. Like, put it this way, if it was a Josh Morrissey that was missing, I think the chances of Ville being into the lineup would be a lot greater than, missing Brenden Dillon in this case. But as I said, this conversation isn't going to stop anytime soon. Now that Ville's healthy, now that he's playing with the Manitoba Moose, getting his legs back, I would imagine you could make the argument, in fact, that because he's been playing games lately, he might be in a better situation to go in and make a positive impact on the club right now. But the bottom line is, Stan's in tonight, and he's gonna have to show that he's worthy of taking that job right now, because they do have a very talented young guy that is going to get in at some point, chomping at the bit to show what he can do. You mentioned Scott Arniel. Why don't we hear from Arnie today? He sort of did the coach's interview today after the game. Bones spoke yesterday after practice, but the number one story today was the Dillon suspension. Here's Scott Arniel from this morning after the skate on Brenden Dillon getting 3 games.
You know that the league's cracking down on that stuff. We just felt that there was a lot of things that when they make those rulings, there's a lot of things, the chicken wing, leaving your feet, direct, I know was kind of hit the head, but at the end of the day, Dilly did a lot of the correct things. And so it's hard. I mean, we expected that there was going to be some kind of decision, but we really weren't hoping for 3, So, but at the end of the day, they're going to miss their player, I'm sure, for a few games as well. So we got to live with it. We got to move on. Now Stan's chance to step in.
With the caveat that I'm not looking to walk you into trouble here, there's been some incidents with some frustration. Obviously, you look at the Cole Perfetti situation, and Kyle Connor, you lost him for 5 weeks, and there was nothing. I guess a lot of players, maybe there's a lot of confusion about how things work, right? But
yeah, you're going down the wrong road for me here. Too big of a fine.
Exactly.
No, it's just whatever. It's you have to live with them. Once a decision comes down, there's not much you can do, and you just got to move on. And I'm sure you'd like to see them, maybe have your own opinion on it as a team, and that you'd like to see things done. But it is what it is.
All right, so there's Arnie with the reaction. We've given our reaction, and we'll hear a little bit more on Stan getting in. But Remo, why don't we play the explanation from the Department of Player Safety? I'm sure there's a lot of people that have not seen or heard that yet. So for all of you asking, why the heck did Brenden Dillon get 3 games? This is why, courtesy of the adjudicators on the matter, the Department of Player Safety.
Acciari skates the puck through the neutral zone as Dillon steps up from the middle of the ice to challenge. As Acciari chips the puck into the Jet zone, Dillon finishes a high, hard hit that misses Acciari's core, making the head the main point of contact on a hit where such head contact was avoidable. This is an illegal check to the head. It is important to note that both elements of the illegal check to the head rule are satisfied on this play. First, the head is the main point of contact, as Dillon's shoulder makes direct and forceful contact with Acciari's head, and it is the head that absorbs the majority of the force of the check. Second, the head contact on this play is avoidable. We acknowledge that Acciari is bent forward as he carries the puck up the ice, but he is in this position for some time and does not materially change the position of his head or body in a way that contributes to the head being the main point of contact. Dillon chooses an angle of approach that cuts across the front of Achari's body, missing his core and picking his head. If Dillon wants to deliver this hit, he must choose an angle that hits through Achari's shoulder and core, rather than one that makes the head the main point of contact. To summarize, this is an illegal check to the head. Achari suffered an injury on the play. Dillon has been suspended once during his 863-game NHL career. The Department of Player Safety has suspended Brenden Dillon for 3 games.
You know, so there you have it from NHL Player Safety, breaking it down. The one thing I found interesting, Reem, was that they mentioned that Dillon had been suspended once in his 800-plus games career. It was in 2017. I believe that is essentially you're treated as a non-offender, so I don't know why that was in there at the end, but whatever. It's 3 games, and we heard Scott Arniel and probably everyone else from the Jets a little miffed, I think, that the severity of what was thrown down.
Yeah, they mentioned that, but then put on the screen there that it said no relevant history. So yeah, like why are they bringing it up? You think this is a makeup call for the Minnesota Wild because he didn't get suspended for Kaprizov and they added a game on that? Like, well, I mean, I don't know.
I'm sure Wild fans, there probably are some Wild fans and maybe even a few that have popped in to check in on what we're up to today that are saying justice has finally been served. Yeah. But I still maintain that play between Dillon and Kaprizov happens dozens of times a game. I saw it, and Adam Lowry did it a couple times. I mean, you always see guys jockeying for position in and around the usual short cross checks low. I didn't think that was suspendable at all. I thought it was a little bit unfortunate, but obviously it depends on what side of the fence you're looking at it from, because I know the people in Minnesota were pretty hot. Although if it was a fourth liner as opposed to Kaprizov, I can pretty much guarantee you that's never mentioned once.
Yeah, I'm kind of just joking around, and I guess the takeaway is don't try to line guys up and hit him in the chest. I don't try to chip his shoulder or stick your butt out and go for a hip check or I don't know if he's going to change the way that he plays or not from that, because I think you're trying to line him up on the chest and his head is leaning forward like that. I think it's tough to line him up, but I agree. Head hits should be out of the game. You don't want to see. I mean, they showed the replay on this video so many times. It is a brutal collision. There's no doubting that, but
it is. It is crazy how far forward he's leaning with his head into it. Yeah. And again, you can't and you don't want to say it's the guy's own fault, because right now the onus is on the player not to make initial contact with the head. And I think we can all agree that Brenden Dillon in this instance is guilty of that. But again, it's a very different hit that, in my opinion, that many other things have gotten, shall we say, have gotten a much lighter sentence from NHLPA. Let's get back to Arnie, because as we mentioned, Logan Stanley is the guy getting in as the extra defenseman right now while Ville Heinola continues to be on the Moose roster. Here's what Arnie had to say about the opportunity for the big guy.
You know what? He's been extremely patient. He's done a great job of, staying ready. I know it's been frustrating for him in the sense that, he wants to play, and like everybody does, and he'll get obviously these 3 games. We're right in the second half of the year, big games, big moments, and hopefully that he's ready to go. I think he is. He's been working really hard, like I say, in practice to be for this opportunity.
All right, so there's Scott Arniel from this morning. Bones spoke yesterday after the practice that the team had, and here's what Rick had to say about Logan Stanley.
One thing about Logan, he works very hard every day in practice, and he treats every drill as a game situation. So he's doing everything he could to control him, to get ready for it. Just be reliable defensively. Don't try to chase the game and try to do too much. Make the simple plays with the puck, and really just simplify the game as much as you can.
All right, so there's Bones. So yeah, I know there's some fans that have been beating the drum for Ville Heinola that were hoping they'd see him as early as tonight. We knew yesterday that wasn't the case. I do think that maybe the fact that it's a 3-game suspension opens up the opportunity for Billy to get a call up a little bit more. But as of right now, as we heard from Scott O'Neill, it sounds like Stan's going to get that opportunity, and we'll see what he does with it. The one thing the Jets have to do, and again, we can obsess and talk about the 7th and 6th defenseman on the team, but it's about scoring a goal or two tonight and getting back to feeling good offensively. Scott O'Neill touched on that, and really want to get a focus on more traffic in front of their net and make Urson, who shut the Jets out a few weeks ago here in Winnipeg, give him a much harder job stopping the puck.
The big thing for us is that, we want somebody for sure. Somebody needs to be kind of stapled to the front of the net because it's kind of how our offense works. But it's a big zone, and we don't need to pile all 3 guys there. Like you said, it's hard to get pucks to the net when you do that. So it's spreading them out. We're certainly seeing lots of teams kind of the way they defend. We want to use that whole zone, and we want to bring them out away from the net. We want them to create some seams and gaps, kind of like you would with a power play. You want to open it up, some ice up for yourself. So, but the next part of that is, the greasy goals we talked about in training camp. We've talked about different parts of the year. We need to get back to getting some of those rebounds, those deflections, those hack and whacks, those second pucks. So we can't obviously be too far away from the net. People need to be crashing when it looks like a shot's going to be going to the net, or bad angle play, whatever it might be. We got to make sure that we're crashing and getting inside ice.
All right, a lot of hard work on the docket for Winnipeg tonight to get back in and, as I say, make Urson's job a little bit more difficult. The guy on the other end of the goaltending matchup will be Laurent Brossoit, who's getting the start tonight in Philly. So LB goes in for Connor Hellebuck, presumably Hellebuck back in for the rematch against Pittsburgh on Saturday night at Canada Life Center. So it'll be up to LB to try to end the losing streak. Here's what Arnie said about the team's play of late and 4 games without getting 2 points.
It's funny because we were just in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to their coaches, and they had lost 3 or 4 in a row, and they said it was probably the best thing that happened to them because they were rolling along pretty good. And so we're hopeful that the same kind of thing will happen. I mean, it was kind of funny with the break in between there. In our first game back, we were sloppy the other night at times, and but at the end of the day, it's just a case of us getting back. I mean, we know how we need to play, what our remedy is, or our sort of makeup is to have success, and that's frustrating the opposition by not giving them a lot of chance. The other night, I think the chances were 15-9 for us, 5-on-5 against Pittsburgh. Pretty good offensive team, and we just got to find a way, like I talked earlier about the greasy goals, and working hard to, the pretty goals that won't always be there, especially in the second half of the year when teams tighten up. So we just got to make sure that stay positive, continue to work hard, and usually we work ourselves out of this.
All right, so there's Scott O'Neill speaking today after the morning skate, just after 6 p.m. We'll drop the puck tonight in Philly for Jets and Flyers. LB in net, Logan Stanley in for the suspended Brenden Dillon. All right, we got a couple more clips from Bones from yesterday talking about the forward line combinations, potential changes, the top 6. But we'll hold on to that and play those when we bring in Murat coming up a little bit later on in the program. We're going to first hook up with Craig Button. But before we do that, I've got good news for anyone that was shut out of tickets for the Canadian Whiskey Masterclass event we are doing with our friends at Canadian Club and the Winnipeg Whiskey Festival. If you missed it, February 29th is the date. It very quickly sold out. But we just got a note this morning that the organizer has given us 4 more tickets. So if you were hoping to join us on the 29th to watch the Winnipeg Jets and Dallas Stars, sip some great whiskey, and learn all about it from a 36-year whiskey ambassador with Beam Suntory and Canadian Club, check out the link in the description or go to our website, winnipegsportstalk.com/whiskey, and do that ASAP because it was sold out. They've given us just 4 more tickets. So if you were on the outside looking in, we'd love to see you there. It should be a really great event of pretty much all WSTers joining us for whiskey and hopefully a big Jet win in what will be a huge game against the Dallas Stars at the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame on Thursday, February 29th. I know it doesn't feel like February outside, but it is. And February is a big month for our friends at Manitoba Battery, who are opening up a brand new store in the coming weeks in the south end of the city on Dover Court. We'll have grand opening specials and sales for you right out of the gate when the doors are officially open. But in the meantime, the location actually of Manitoba Battery probably doesn't matter to most of you, because you all know that not only will you get the best prices in town, period, on your battery, beating the pants off the big box stores, any purchase over $60, Donnie and the gang will deliver it to you anywhere inside the perimeter for free. That's right. So stay tuned for more information on the new location. But in the meantime, for all your battery needs, the best prices in town, manitobabattery.com, or give them a call at 204-783-8787. And a shout out to our friends at Modern Man Barbershop as well. Guys, if you're looking in the mirror, realizing you need a cut or maybe a new look, Modern Man's got 8 locations conveniently located throughout the city waiting for you to help you out with a variety of grooming services, including great haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more. Make an appointment and book your look at your nearest Modern Man by going online at modernmanbarber.com. And don't forget to follow them on Instagram at Modern Man Barbershops. And just before we bring in Craig Button, we mentioned LB going tonight. That means Connor Hellebuck in the net Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the debut of Sean Monahan. The time is now to make sure you are in the building for Saturday night in this upcoming homestand by going to winnipegjets.com/tickets. Get your tickets for Saturday night against the Penguins. The big visit of the Sharks on Valentine's Day. Perfect date night, guys. And then, of course, the much anticipated return of the Minnesota Wild. Bad blood indeed. February 20th at Canada Life Center. It's all there at winnipegjets.com/tickets. And while you're there, check out their smaller packages and maybe consider you or your business getting back into season tickets for the remainder of the season, which what should be a very exciting push to the playoffs. And then, of course, get the best seats at the best prices with preferred playoff priority and availability through your Winnipeg Jets package. It's all there at winnipegjets.com. All right, Murat coming up in a few minutes, but it's always a treat bringing on TSN's Director of Scouting, Craig Button, to Winnipeg Sports Talk. Craig, you're back, refreshed from Mexico, ready for a push to the playoffs like all the NHLers are, I bet.
I sure am. But let's get the first things first. Your Chiefs are playing in the Super Bowl, trying to go back-to-back. The last team to do that was my Patriots back in 03-04. But you can probably see that I'm sporting my Michigan stuff. You know, national champions 2023. Watching the game, I watched the Alabama game. Me and John Rosen, a Michigan alumni, we're sitting in Gothenburg watching it. So, I hope I'm going with the Chiefs. I'm rooting for Travis and Taylor, and I think it's amazing to me. I don't know. I mean, you're a Chiefs fan, and I keep hearing about the 49ers. The 49ers never stopped the Detroit Lions at any point during the championship game. The only team that stopped the Detroit Lions were the Detroit Lions. Drop balls on to get first downs, the fumble. Never did the San Francisco 49ers stop Detroit. And I don't think they're going to stop the Kansas City Chiefs either.
I hope you're right. It'll be a few nervous days before we finally kick off in Vegas on Sunday. Hey, listen, I want to get to the present-day Jets, but you're wearing that Michigan shirt, and you mentioned Michigan and, of course, the World Juniors. Let me ask you first about Rucker McGroarty. He looked great at the tournament. He has been, I believe he was the player of the month for last month. He's absolutely killing it at Michigan right now. Craig, if Rucker McGroarty signed with the Winnipeg Jets at the end of the season and came in, do you think he could be an impact player for the Winnipeg Jets at some point potentially in the postseason?
I think it's always hard for a young player to come in and be an impact player. Do I think he could come in and add some attributes and elements? I do think he could do that. The Winnipeg Jets have, in my view, have lots of impact players. And I think for a young player like McGroarty to come in, I think that he could more than hold his own. And he's got an infectious enthusiasm about him and a big time competitive spirit. So if you ask Rutger McGroarty to go in and be the third goaltender in the morning skate, skate and just stop shots. He would go in there and give it everything he's got, and that's the type of person he is. Over time, and I'm very open about this. I have a man crush on Rutger. Like, I love him as a person. I love him as a hockey player.
You and the whole city of Winnipeg.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to be on that. I'm happy to be on the McGroarty train. I really am, because he's a special person. And he's a really, really strong hockey player. And, if you take all the individual things, and, he might not be in a skills competition in the All-Star game, but when you're playing and you're trying to win, you want Rutger McGroarty on your side. I'm going to tell you who he reminds me of in terms of the impact that I think he'll eventually have. And I worked for him, and he's a Hall of Famer, and I think Rutger will probably have a little bit more offense to him. But Bob Gainey is the player that I see Rutger being like to a team. The ability to change the course of a game, to will the game in your team's favor, to do things that are so impactful that don't show up always in the stats column, but they show up in the win column. And I think that that's the type of approach. Having watched Rutger for so long now, and it feels like I've been watching him forever, but the continued development, I'm really comfortable saying that I think he could be like a Bob Gainey impact on a team. And I'll say it right now. I think he's an untouchable player. I know everybody talks about you got to give up something to get something, but unless you're getting a player that can have that type of impact in right now, there's no way I would trade Rutger McGroarty. He is the untouchable player in my view.
Well, and you just mentioned all those attributes that he brings. I mean, and the energy that he brings. I mean, I'd want that even if it wasn't on the ice around my team in the playoffs. And just quickly on Rutger, I mean, it's now, the second season since he's been drafted. I remember speaking with you and your excitement about Rutger and the pick when the Jets made it 2 years ago. How far has he come from when he was 18, hearing his name called, to right now being on the cusp of turning pro at the end of the season?
Well, I think he's progressed significantly, and using your term, he's come so far, and that's what you want to see from a young player. You draft a player at 18, you're projecting of what you think he can become, and certainly the Jets, loved Rutger McGroarty. They saw lots of potential in him, and I'm going to bet that probably the Winnipeg Jets might be really impressed with how much his development has gone on. And, I'll use an example. When we drafted Jarome Iginla back in 1995 with the Dallas Stars, we knew Jarome was going to be, when I say we knew, our belief was that Jarome would be a really good, strong NHL player, 30 goals, power forward, maybe 35 goals. Well, he far exceeded that. So, I can say that we were wrong in our projection about Jarome because he was a superstar. And we didn't project him as a superstar. We projected him as a really good, strong player on a team, and he became far more than that. And I think that that's where Rutger, I'm not comparing him to Jarome Iginla. I'm comparing it to the progression from the time he got drafted. And I don't think there's any doubt that, in my mind, that when he comes into the NHL, his impact will be significant on a team. And it'll be infectious, as you point out about the enthusiasm. The saying, no bad days. I don't think that Rutger has any bad days. I've never seen him. I've been around him so much. I've never seen that. Even when he was having his injury recovery leading into the World Junior, I mean, he was just zeroed right in on what he was going to do. The first game at the World Junior, he had, I don't know what he had. He must have had about a half dozen chances, and he was just off a little bit of the timing. And even after that game, he was like, "No, I'm okay. It feels good to be back. I'm gonna score. I'm gonna do the things I need to do." And of course, he did.
Well, we'll be following him throughout the rest of this season in Michigan, and then I know a lot of people crossing their fingers that we might see him in Winnipeg at some point later on this season. Someone that hasn't actually played a game yet here in Winnipeg, but made his Jets debut was Sean Monahan on Pittsburgh. Craig, what did you think about the acquisition of Monahan and what he brings to the Winnipeg Jets?
I think it's a terrific acquisition for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, they find themselves in a spot at this point in the season as one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. And certainly when you look at the way they've played, defensively, how deep they are, Sean just makes them deeper and stronger. And he's had an excellent season in Montreal. And when you consider how healthy Sean Monahan is, you now see a player that can be productive. Sean Monahan isn't the same player today that he was in Calgary, earlier on in his career. But when you're bookended by Mark Scheifele and Adam Lowry, I think it's a perfect spot for Sean Monahan. But he doesn't just have to be a bookend between those players. You can move Sean Monahan around your lineup, and for Rick Bowness to be able to have that flexibility with a player that, on the ice, you're never worried because he's a great face-off player. He's very conscientious defensively. He's good on the power play. He can play the wing. He can play with different players. And I think that adding all those attributes in Sean Monahan's game to an already really good, strong, functioning team is nothing but positive for the Winnipeg Jets. And so, people, it's a first-round draft pick. Well, I don't know if I've ever said this. I consider 21 to 50 all first-round draft picks. I can name 20 guys right now that I know are going to be first-round draft picks. After that, I'm not as certain. I can take it, but I really believe, and that's why teams, and you hear it all the time. You hear they draft a guy at 41. We can't believe he was there at 41. Do you know why? Because they rated him in the 20s, and that's how it works. And so it's not a first-round draft. It's a first-round draft pick because that's the first go. But to me, the price to be a good team comes with a price. And I don't think the price that the Winnipeg Jets paid for Sean Monahan is anything that's prohibitive. That's anything that should be considered unjust. I think it's a great move for a Winnipeg Jets team that has designs on going deep into the playoffs and contending.
Craig, speaking of the upcoming deadline, there's been a lot of talk now that Monahan is a Winnipeg Jets about Kevin Cheveldayoff potentially moving his focus to an improvement on the blue line, and the name Chris Tanev's come up quite a bit. What would you think about a fit of Tanev with the Flames? And from what you're hearing, what's it going to take to get Chris Tanev out of Calgary, considering the interest in him around the league?
Well, the Toronto media, who are really just Maple Leafs cheerleaders, they're starting to run the narrative that Chris Tanev isn't worth a second-round draft pick, or he's only worth, you're not going to get more than a second round. Oh, okay. Okay. So, yeah, right. Okay. Listen, you're going for it, right? I mean, Ben Sherratt went for a first-round draft pick. David Savard went for a first-round draft pick. Don't start telling me that Chris Tanev isn't worth a second-round draft, isn't worth a first-round draft pick, because he's a really, really good player. I talked about Rutger. Chris Tanev is that player that comes into your lineup, and he is fully committed to doing whatever it takes to help your team win. Fully committed. He can play lots of minutes. He can play rugged minutes. He can play the heavy minutes. He can play against the other teams. And when I look at the Winnipeg Jets, and I think that me looking at their team and where they're at, I think an addition, some strength on the blue line that can ease some of the burden. Number one, on Josh Morrissey. Number two, off of DeMello and Pionk, who aren't bigger defensemen. They carry themselves. They got some weight. They're competitive. I think that would really help that blue line. And you now have a really good, strong penalty killer. You have somebody that can match up hard against the other team's best players. And Chris Tanev doesn't give an inch to anybody. He's territorial, he's competitive and combative. And to me, that type of a player, when you're going into the playoffs and you want to strengthen that area of your team, and that's your top two pairs of defense, I think Chris Tanev would be a terrific fit with the Winnipeg Jets. And certainly, we'll wait and see what happens, and understanding that, everybody's got, but there's no way that anybody's going to tell me he's not worth a first-round draft pick when I see Ben Sherratt and I see David Savard, to just name a couple of guys that got traded for first-round draft picks, go for that price. There's just no way. And again, you want to be serious about winning. Don't tell me what the cost is. Tell me, are you prepared to pay it? And that's a simple yes or no. Because the price, when your team is really good and your team has a chance to really push itself forward, the price of not doing something is far greater than the price that you might have to pay to get that player or players.
Craig Button with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Craig, last week, and you knew it was going to happen at some point, the Jets were going to have to expose, in all likelihood, one of their young defensemen. Declan Chisholm got plucked off the waiver wire for Minnesota. And now Brenden Dillon is suspended. Now, for tonight's game number 1, Logan Stanley's been with the team. He's going to be in the lineup. Many people, myself included, think in the near future we're probably going to see Ville Heinola at some point. Assuming there's no additions to the blue line, or until that happens, what do you think the best course for the Jets is to get Ville in and get him into the lineup, considering how well he played in camp, the fact that he probably won a spot in the opening lineup and then missed half a season with that ankle injury and is now playing with the Manitoba Moose? How do they bring him in, and what makes the most sense, considering how well the 6 ahead of Logan Stanley in the depth chart have played so far this year, looking at the goals against numbers?
Well, I mean, one of the best defensive teams in the league. I mean, there's no question about it. And certainly, Declan Chisholm, he played 2 games for the Winnipeg Jets. They couldn't get him in the lineup because the players were just saying, like, you can't take us out. We're playing too well. And I think that's a real credit to the 6 blue liners that have really carried the load. And Nate Schmidt, it was a healthy scratch a couple of times. And Logan Stanley, had his spots out of the lineup, some of it because of injury, some of it because he just couldn't get in the lineup. And to your point, Ville was having a fantastic preseason. He looked like he looked sturdier. He looked really more confident in his defending ability. And ironically, just an unfortunate injury, defending hard like he was showing that he was capable of doing. So I guess the silver lining here is for the Winnipeg Jets in the immediate future, the 3 games Brenden Dillon is out, you've lost Declan Chisholm, is that if Ville is able to get in there now and start trying to look, it's a good opportunity to get him in there, get his feet wet. You're giving him that opportunity to try to find his way in the lineup. You're not unseating somebody to get him in there. And I don't know what his state of readiness is to come into in there, but if he is ready now, I'd get him in there right away. I'd get him in there right now playing and get his feet wet and then see where he's going. I mean, I'm not splitting up. I'm just not splitting up 44-2. I don't think you have to do that. Now with Brenden Dillon out of the lineup, it's going to be interesting. What do you do with Neil Pionk? Do you want Heinola and Pionk to play together? Certainly Sandberg has been a really good, strong player for the Winnipeg Jets this year. I might be inclined to play Pionk and Stanley together and then have Heinola play with Sandberg because Dillon's been so steady in his play this year. If Ville's able to come back in there and play and his readiness dictates that he's ready to play.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow. I mean, I think for many of us, we don't need to get down the inconsistency of NHL player safety, but I think we thought it might be 1 game or 2 games. Well, now that it's 3 games, it does give them that chance. And the team's going to be coming home from Philly after this game. I think a lot of people would love to see Ville get a chance potentially Saturday against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I guess from his perspective, Craig, knowing how important his next time in the lineup is, it's a matter of going in, showing everything that he did in training camp, and giving Rick Bowness a very, very difficult decision to take him out of the lineup when opportunity presents itself.
Coaches will tell you, at these points in time, that this is a good problem to have too many good defensemen, right? Doesn't make the decisions any easier, but those are decisions you want to be able to have. And certainly, if Ville can find that form coming back from that ankle injury, it'll only help the Winnipeg Jets going forward. I'm going to dive in here. I'm going to dive in here on the suspension to Brenden Dillon. On November 30th, in a game versus the Edmonton Oilers, Matthias Janmark absolutely hammered Josh Morrissey in the head on an interference call that I said on the broadcast should have been a 2-game suspension. They didn't even give him a suspension. They didn't even give him a fine. And now when I see the Brenden Dillon play, that's the inconsistencies that people look at from the Department of Player Safety and go, what? I know that not every play is the same, but how could Matthias Janmark not get suspended for that? And then Brenden Dillon gets 3 games. And I'm not saying that Brenden Dillon didn't deserve to be suspended, but to me, it's the inconsistencies that get themselves the criticism that comes their way.
The Dillon play was really strange in that, I mean, when you look at it back, I mean, Acciari at one point kind of reminds me of one of those speed skaters, where they put both of their hands behind their head and just like lean right in head first. I mean, it certainly didn't look like Dillon was intending to do it or headhunting. And you don't see or you certainly didn't see that 5, 6, 7 years ago in the league of guys leading with their head like that when they're entering into the zone. Like, I'm not really too sure how much he could have done. Listen, when you see the guy's helmet fly off and he gets hurt, obviously there's going to be a call from NHL player safety. But I'll admit, Craig, I was stunned considering what we've seen for other things, certainly involving the Winnipeg Jets. And don't get us going on that with Hartman and all that, that Brenden Dillon all of a sudden is the guy that's getting a 3-gamer when you look at what they've done so far in other, maybe not totally similar situations, but with what 3 games has been given for this year.
I totally agree. And that's why I say, I was right in the building for that Edmonton game on November 30th. And Matthias, it was complete interference. It was complete head contact. Josh Morrissey had to leave because of concussion protocol. The spotters took him onto the game, and it was a really tight, competitive game, as we know. But to me, I don't think players, for the most part, are going out and trying to intend to, intend. Things happen in the course of a game, and you got to be in control. And Matthias Janmark was completely not in control. And I agree with you on the Brenden Dillon thing. It's like, okay, what's the responsibility? And I'm not here to blame any victim whatsoever. You look at it, what could a Brenden Dillon be doing differently? But the inconsistency in the application of the number of games suspended just puzzles me. It puzzles me. I don't know what else to say.
Craig, going into the break, the Jets, some of the goals really dried up. And I think it's not a coincidence that Mark Scheifele was out of the lineup. Coming back from the break, Scheifele's in, and I thought looked really good. Monahan had some nice shifts with Ehlers and Perfetti, but they got shut out by the Penguins. And there is, I would say, there's a little bit of nervousness considering what's happened in the second half of seasons before. Can you calm the nerves of Jet fans? Should they be worried right now? Where do you think this team is at? And looking ahead to this next game tonight, game Saturday, in these next few weeks, what do the Winnipeg Jets need to do to get back to their winning ways?
I'll try my best to, try to alleviate the fears of Jets fans, because I see this team as very different. And even before the break, I thought that they were, they lose 1-0 in overtime in Toronto. I thought that Winnipeg was the better team, and certainly Samsonov played excellent. On the return game, I thought Winnipeg played really well. Samsonov again was a real significant difference maker. And certainly when you score 1 goal in 2 games, that it's hard to win games. So you got to find a way to score. Defensively, this is one of the best teams in the league, and they're still not giving up very much. It would be one thing if you're floundering in an area of your strength and that's falling off. And certainly, the record, what they did, 2 goals or less for that stretch, 3 goals or less for over 30 games. It was beyond impressive, and that's not going to carry through. It's hard to carry that through for 20 games, let alone 30 plus. What I see now is a team that is still committed, and this is what I like about the Jets. They're still committed, and we hear this all the time. We're going to play to our identity. They're going to play to the things that give them strength. And that's what I continue to see for the Winnipeg Jets. Even against Pittsburgh on Tuesday night, I thought that they were committed. They were playing. Yes, they had some good chances. They weren't able to bury it. And Tristan Jarry deserves some credit for that too. The goaltender gets in the way. But, you try to find a way. Last year when they were struggling and they went into their struggles, they weren't getting chances. Like the offense dried up because they weren't getting chances. The defense was vulnerable because they were creating their vulnerabilities. I don't see that in this little stretch here. So until I start to see signs of that, and I don't think I'm going to, because I think that this team is very different. Mark Scheifele coming back after the injury and after the break. It's going to be a hard game in Philadelphia on Thursday night. But Philadelphia is a hard team. But I think the Winnipeg Jets are a hard team. And I think that all the things that they've done so well to find themselves in the position they are in the National Hockey League and in the Western Conference are things that are going to serve them well. So I don't see any reason. I know when you start to have some losses and they start to stretch a little bit more, you start to go, oh boy, is this a sign? I don't see signs of a team that's going to dip. Yes, they got to find a way to score, and that has to be the objective right now. But they're getting their chances, and they haven't moved away from the identity and the strengths of what got them to this point.
Looking at the standings right now, I mean, it's so bunched up at the top of the Central with the top 3 teams in Winnipeg, Colorado, and Dallas. I mean, Vancouver's had this incredible run. They've got a little bit of room, but you got Vegas and Edmonton right there. Craig, how important in your mind is finishing first in those divisions and not only getting one of the wild card teams, which I think we can all agree there's a bit of a gap from those top 6, but also not being in that 2-3 series in the first round of the playoffs, which, I mean, no matter how you shake it up, you're going to have an elite team, a really good team that you could argue is a Stanley Cup contender on the golf course 2 weeks into the playoffs.
Well, I mean, you look at the 6 teams, and it's Vancouver, Vegas, Edmonton in the Pacific, and it's Winnipeg, Colorado, Dallas in the Central, right? And they are the 6 teams. I mean, they're right. So your choice is really simple. Do you want to get into a 2-3 matchup where you're going to get bruised, you're going to get battered, you're going to get cut up, but chunks of you are going to be taken out of you even if you win? And you're right, 2 teams, 2 legitimate Stanley Cup contenders are going to be out in the first round of the playoffs. Legitimate Stanley Cup contenders out in the first round of the playoffs. You want to avoid that at every cost. You really do. And so, I have this much time, Andrew, for the NBA in-season tourney. And anybody that wants to suggest that the NHL should do something like that, come on, I'll fight you. Well, I'm not a fighter, but I'll fight you in some way. I'll do spitballs at you. I'll argue with that because what we have right now, we have our in-season tournament. We have the race for first place. We have the race to make sure you're not in that 2-3 spot. And then the playoffs start. We don't need an in-season tournament. We have everything you need from a competitive initiative with our teams. But finishing first, getting the wild card, finishing first in each of those divisions, get you that. That is something that is a real benefit to the teams finishing first.
One team that's not in those 6 that certainly was at the start of the year was the LA Kings. I mean, what has happened to the Kings? Is that season salvageable? And how concerning is the first year for Dubois in LA?
Let's start with Pierre-Luc Dubois. How concerning is it? I mean, they signed him to a long-term contract, made a big trade, and to say he would be underwhelming, he needs to improve to get to the level of underwhelming. That's how bad he's been. And his competitive spirit has been terrible. And when your effort and your determination and your competitive spirit is where it's at, and I mean, we're talking on measurables, it's like right low. And that's no good. Like, that's something under his control. Todd McClellan, was working with him. He finally came out publicly and said, you need more. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I heard Dave Keon talk about it during All-Star Week in Toronto. You got to take a look at yourself in the mirror. He was talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs core. He said, you've won 1 playoff round in 8 years. Winning the Stanley Cup and competing for the Stanley Cup is what matters. You better look at yourself in the mirror. Pierre-Luc Dubois better stand up and stay in front of that mirror for a long time, because the problem that is Pierre-Luc Dubois will be staring him right back in the face, and he's capable of a lot more. Cam Talbot, we've seen him over the course of his career. His highs are really high and his lows are really low. The problem is you never know when the highs are coming or when the lows are coming. That's Cam Talbot. That's what you get when you get Cam Talbot. And certainly his play hasn't been very good. And then you look at Pierre-Luc Dubois and the offense. I've had this discussion with people in Los Angeles. Kevin Fiala hasn't produced. And people keep telling me how many chances he's had and everything. Like, he went through a long stretch without scoring. They're counting on him to score. When you get paid that money, and you get paid the amount of money that you're getting paid at those levels that Pierre-Luc Dubois and Fiala are getting paid, you got to score. Don't tell me how many chances you got. Don't tell me how many expected goals you got. If you got expected goals, that means you're doing the right things. But at some point in time, that puck's got to go in the net. And when you're going 20-plus games and you're getting 2 goals and you're going long stretches without scoring, doesn't cut it anymore. So the Winnipeg Jets, with respect to the goaltending, Dubois, Fiala, the scoring, I mean, I was in Calgary, and I'll give you an example. The 01-02 season, I think we started out 13-2-1 in our first 15 games, and we missed the playoffs. We fell right off. I'm watching the LA Kings. It feels like something very similar.
Yeah, they, obviously you make the coaching change, and not much else for that team to do than either step up, play better, or potentially be out of the playoffs, similar to that Calgary team that you just mentioned. Craig, thanks so much for the time. This was great. Enjoy the Super Bowl on the weekend, and we'll look forward to talking to you later on, maybe closer to the deadline as things heat up around the NHL, and hopefully we can talk about the Jets team that's back doing what they did heading into the break for the most part with 30 wins before the All-Star game.
Well, you enjoy your time away. Enjoy emceeing the wedding. I hope you sing a little love story by Taylor Swift during the wedding, and I hope you get to sing it on Sunday night after the Chiefs win.
You're the best, Craig. Thanks so much. All right, man, that was a great segment with Craig Button. Thanks to him, and great to see everybody in chat with their take on it. Perfect segue, if you haven't already, to get in on it. Why not question of the day for Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray? Very simply, fair or foul, 3 games for Brenden Dillon. Sound off in the comments. If you're watching us later on, leave a comment in the description of this video. Speaking of commenters, I got to give a special thanks to Cosmic Tales MB. Got a nice little delivery at my door, a little birthday present for yours truly. I guess Cosmic had heard that I'd mentioned that that was coming up on the weekend. So thank you very much for doing that. We are going to bring in Murat in a moment, talk more about the Jets heading into this game in Philadelphia in just a second. A little bit of a quieter day on the Bomber front, but what a week it has been for the Bombers. Bringing back Brady Oliveira, bringing back Dalton Schoen, and of course the big news last night, bringing back Brandon Alexander to the defensive secondary. Of course, all our Bomber reports brought to you by our great sponsors at Princess Auto, who are now the official naming rights partners of the home of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and can't wait to get to Princess Auto Stadium coming up this season and cheering on the blue and gold once again. Of course, Princess Auto is the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them in person on Panet Road or Portage Avenue West locations, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Got to thank the gang at Wallace & Wallace for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And listen, Wallace & Wallace has been synonymous with excellence in fencing and overhead doors since 1946. And we'll get to the spring and summer, and we'll see their fences and trucks all over the city. But right now, while it is getting colder coming up over the next couple weeks, don't forget winter is the time that puts the most stress on your garage door. And the right time to prevent downtime this winter is now. Give Wallace & Wallace a call to book your maintenance and inspection service call today for residential and commercial overhead door sales and service. There's only one name or two you need to know. That is Wallace & Wallace. And guys, if you're looking at your closet and looking, you know what, I think it's time for me to step up my menswear game. One spot will take care of all of that, and that, of course, is F Apparel down at 190 Smith Street. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and the biggest and best selection of menswear accessories in town. What I would suggest you do is make an appointment or find out more online at EPHapparel.com. And don't forget about that 15% discount if you're in a wedding party when the fellas get their suits at F Apparel. Again, FApparel.com, and pop down and see him at 190 Smith Street downtown. All right, Jets back in action tonight, but we've got a lot to talk about. And Murat of The Athletic joins us now. Murat, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, how you doing? Happy birthday coming up.
I'm doing well. Yeah, Saturday. Well, I finally, Remis and Connor are going to be holding down the fort for a week, actually getting away for the first time, and which is going to be a whole lot of fun. I had thought that maybe, I didn't think that this would overlap with the Super Bowl, but hey, being on holidays for a birthday and your team in the Super Bowl, not a bad deal. I will certainly take it. But before I get to worrying about that, we got a game to worry about tonight, and we'll get into the lineup, Logan Stanley in, and all of that. First off, I just have to ask you your perspective on Brenden Dillon getting tagged with 3 games. I thought that he'd probably get a game, maybe 2. I will admit I was surprised that they gave him 3 games. just considering what has and hasn't been punished up until this point this season.
Yeah, I'd like to go through and do a proper accounting of what my guts actually say about each Department of Player Safety decision over the months or over the years, because there's a little part of me that says, okay, this guy got hurt, he's concussed, it was a clear shot to the head, or a hit to the head was the primary point of contact. And I'm like, okay, 3 games, that sounds completely reasonable. But then you go through the actual history of what some of the other calls were, and coming into this, I've just watched that Craig Button clip. He was just on your show comparing it to the Matthias Janmark hit. And for me, that Janmark hit actually is worse because he pops his shoulder upwards towards Morrissey's head. So in terms of trying to find consistency, it's just hard to do. For me, my guts say, okay, if you're trying to take headshots out of the game, 3 games sounds like a lot, but I can reconcile it. It's when you start comparing it to other incidents throughout the years where you can always find one that makes you shake your head. And that's kind of what I'm doing fresh from seeing that Janmark comparison.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I don't know. We've sort of spoken about it, but seeing that Janmark hit, that was a play. The puck was nowhere near. Josh Morrissey was not expecting it, as you wouldn't. And I think it's more difficult to prepare yourself for a hit. I still think it's really weird the way Achari basically led with his head into that, and I think that was a big part of it as well. I mean, you blame the victim for that? I mean, you shouldn't know, but I mean, it's all part and parcel, and that's something you see way more now in the National Hockey League than you did a few years ago before they penalized players for this. It does leave the Jets with a pretty significant hole in their blue line, though, going into Philly tonight and then coming back home for Pittsburgh on Saturday night. Were you surprised at all that, from Scott O'Neill, we played this earlier. It sounds like Stan's going to get these 3 games. Obviously, the minute a hole opens up on the blue line, there's a section of Jets fandom that goes to Twitter and is all about Ville Heinola. And I think many of us would like to see how he'd look in this lineup right now, given a short opportunity to get in there. What do you make of tonight, of using Stanley tonight? And it seems the plan going forward that at least for these 3 games, 64 is going to get his chance to play 3 games in a row.
Yeah, Logan Stanley's the next guy up, right? Declan Chisholm isn't kicking around. Kyle Capobianco and Ville Heinola are with the Moose. He's the guy that's there to play. He also had more games played than Chisholm prior to this, so he makes sense as the next person up in Winnipeg's roster right now. When it comes to Heinola, I think his time is coming, or his time should come. I was looking at the schedule, though, to try to estimate in my own mind, do I think he's going to get a game coming up? And one thing to keep in mind, obviously, the Jets are on the road right now in Philadelphia, so Logan Stanley's with him. That's game 1 for darn sure. That's obviously his. Winnipeg's next game's on Saturday, and Heinola will be traveling with the Moose to Grand Rapids for that. So he'll be the Moose play Friday and Saturday. So that's 2 out of 3 games right there that I think just logistically, I don't know why you'd parachute somebody else in to skip over Logan Stanley, who is ostensibly the team's 7th defenseman. Whether you agree with it, whether I agree with it, what are you doing if the guy that you're carrying around as the 7th defenseman isn't somebody that you plug and play at this moment? It's that 3rd game, Wednesday against San Jose, if I've got it correct, where there will have been a few games in between Jets, few days in between Jets games, pardon me, and you might be able to more easily return Heinola or call him up if the circumstances demand it. But for Logan Stanley, this is an opportunity, assuming he acquits himself well in those first 2 games. I think that 3rd game seems reasonable as well. And, if the Jets do anything in the playoffs, they have to prepare for the possibility that not all of their top 6 defensemen are going to play in every single game, because that's just how things work. So you need to be able to trust him a little bit.
Yeah, well, let's get to a comment here. The top line guys are in here, and this is sort of funny. But you do hear this from some fans. Can we stop pretending Heinola's time is coming? LMAO. I personally, considering the camp that he had and the fact that they basically said that he was going to be in the opening lineup for opening night if he didn't get hurt, I'm not of the opinion that because he got injured and a bunch of other guys play as well, that he's not in the future plans of the Winnipeg Jets, including this season. Like, I firmly believe that at some point over the course of these next 30 games, probably most likely when the rosters expand, he will come in, get a few games. And I think at that point, the Winnipeg Jets will make those decisions post-trade deadline as well as to what their best roster is, given the players available to play. Where are you at all on that? On what's the most likely? Have they given up on Ville Heinola? Is he done? Is he? Should we stop talking about him? Or what is the situation with Ville now that he's playing consistently and getting his season back on track after being out for the better part of 3 months?
Yeah, there's a part of me that thinks that Winnipeg's seventh defenseman, when the time comes post trade deadline, isn't going to be Logan Stanley. It's not going to be Ville Heinola. It's going to be somebody whose name we don't know right here and now. So it may be that Heinola doesn't play a major role for the Winnipeg Jets before this season is over. And the same could be said about Logan Stanley. I think Winnipeg has a clear top six and maybe poking around the edges of upgrades on that front as well. Now, in terms of, is Ville Heinola's time coming? Is it around the corner necessarily? No, because we see what's happening during this call-up situation. We've heard Kevin Cheveldayoff say in many seasons before he's excited about seeing Ville Heinola on the team, and then he doesn't end up playing. But this is a different circumstance a little bit. The coaching staff has clearly said, Bowness said it to me when I asked in Winnipeg, that he had earned a job on the team out of training camp, and that's substantial. That's new. It's also in the Jets' history to wait until a player's off of his ELC before making the difficult decisions on him. So if you're impatient, if you're waiting for a sense of like, okay, Murat, you're full of it. If Winnipeg doesn't play Heinola in the next week or two, you might actually be right about that. But I think that he's still very much a part of Winnipeg's plans. I've spoken to his agent. I've spoken to people around the team. I believe that he's part of the team's plans. I believe that he's been inquired about over the years for trades and things like that. And I believe that Kevin Cheveldayoff has said, no, absolutely not. We're waiting for him, and there's going to be a time where he's part of the Winnipeg Jets. And, until they ship him, I'm actually going to continue to believe that because of sort of the conversations that I've had in recent times.
What, it is... Like, I also think this situation might be different if it was a different defenseman being out. I think it is an easy fix to move Logan Stanley in, probably eat up some of the penalty killing minutes, and play a third line role. But with Ville, who is, playing regularly and playing a lot with the Manitoba Moose right now, when he comes and gets in, do you feel that it will be an audition to basically prove to the coaching staff, like he apparently did in training camp, that he's one of the six best to be part of that group? And again, granted, what you just said is very accurate. If they do make an addition on the blue line, that might be more competition for the spot. His particular situation when he does get in, how much is on the line, and what would he have to do to play regularly, I guess is the question.
I think he'd have to stun people to play regularly. The Jets did make it clear early on this season that Nate Schmidt didn't have to be an everyday NHL defenseman if his level wasn't up. But I think that part of why Nate Schmidt's level wasn't up early on this season is because of injuries sustained during training camp. He came back into the lineup, and to my eye, he was trying to do an awful lot when situations didn't necessarily call for it. I think Schmidt was putting a lot of pressure on himself to make things happen, even in moments where it didn't work. His game's come a long way at this point. You can count on that third pairing. And even though it's Winnipeg's third best pairing and Nate Schmidt's probably the sixth most effective defenseman, they're winning their minutes. I relate that to Heinola because I think that if there's a spot for Heinola on this roster, it's in Schmidt's place. Similar offensive instincts, great vision with the puck on their stick. Heinola is probably more fleet of foot at this point and certainly not as experienced at the NHL level. You'd see a higher ceiling, I would think, from this point forward in their careers, even if Heinola never becomes as good as Schmidt was in his excellent top 4 days. So that's the roster spot I have in mind. If he can outplay Schmidt, that's where the job is available. I also think about next season where Winnipeg's looking at, I think it's $4.7 million worth of raise to Hellebuck and Scheifele on the same roster with not a lot of turnover, depending on what happens to Dylan DeMello and Brenden Dillon. And you're going to need Heinola in a big way if he can deliver that Nate Schmidt type performance in that spot. There may be a future where he takes over that particular job, and that's his way into the NHL.
Yeah, obviously Perfetti's going to be getting a new contract. As to whether it's a bridge deal or a longer-term deal, that will affect the AAV, but it's not going down. And again, not to get past past this season and look too far into the future. But that's part of the reason why I'm so intrigued with Brad Lambert and maybe first and foremost, Rucker McGroarty, because if you do have veteran players making more money, having some players that can contribute on ELCs or relatively lesser value contracts goes a long, long way to putting together a roster that can truly contend. Just one more on Villy. Let's say he does get in a month or two, and it's the situation we're talking about. What do you think is most important for him? Because we know what he can do. I mean, I think he would be great. I'd certainly love to see him mix in on the power play right now, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what's the most important thing for him to do, considering the way this team has been defensively all season, to earn the trust of the coaches to make that decision difficult, if not make it in his favor?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, every player, it would be create more than give up, whatever it looks like stylistically. And I think Ville Heinola is probably already good enough to create more than he gives up, and may have been that good for a little while prior to this amazing camp that he had. But for me, if the Jets are going to trust Heinola with substantial minutes and maybe even make him their sixth now or promote him over Stanley at least, I think he's going to need to help on the offensive side of the puck. They're going to want to be able to look at clean breakouts, clean transition plays, some nice offensive zone vision when Jets defensemen hop into the play. I think you want to see pointed examples of those things working, where Heinola is doing the best things that he does. And he's also going to want to get out of the games that he plays in, should he get into games, without offering any video clip worthy defensive foible. And I think that his defending has come a long way in recent years. I think he's improving on that regard and impressing people at that AHL level, as he's done for some time as well. But I think with the veteran coaching staff and the state of the Jets roster and the importance of the season, if they can point at even one thing where he plays 99% of an excellent game and makes one play up the middle that turns into a turnover and somebody scores, that's going to be a problem. And I think that's the challenge of being on the cusp of that roster spot for Heinola right now.
Murat Atesh with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Let's talk about the forwards. What do you think of Sean Monahan, and what did you think of the top six? By the way, Remo, if you want to get that clip number 7 ready, we'll go to that after we hear from Murat. But thoughts on the look of the top six? I know they didn't score, but Monahan's debut and Scheifele back in the lineup.
Yeah, first off, I like the good first impression that they played him right off the hop. First game in, it's the opening face-off, and he wins the draw off of Sidney Crosby at that. That's a nice touch. I mean, there may have been more considerations than just getting the new guy in, but I like it. I like that as an approach. I thought his minutes were relatively low event, to be honest. I didn't see a guy come in and star. I didn't see a guy come in and, become a GOAT in a 3-0 loss. It was just a situation of a new guy getting involved. I think his vision is going to be important. His ability to find Nikolai Ehlers for transition plays is going to be important. He and Cole Perfetti's chemistry in the offensive zone is going to be important. All of that stuff. So for now, I think he acquitted himself well in his first Jets game, is how I would see it. For me, most impressive player of the Jets game was probably Mark Scheifele, which is odd if you look at that line's possession stats. They got buried a little bit. But I actually think that the number one center was going, and his wingers, Kyle Connor and Gabriel Velarde, were a little bit rustier than anything else.
Agreed.
Yeah, he turned corners on people. He drove the net on people. He created chances. It wasn't there for them, and certainly they're going to need to watch how they handle the defensive zone in transition. But I think Mark Scheifele being a leader and being an offensive driver, obviously the goal got called back. That's a good sign, and I think if you're looking at solutions to Winnipeg's offensive woes, more Mark Scheifele would be one of those solutions.
Murat, let's listen to this clip yesterday, because Mike was in Philly and he was asking about the combinations. And I'm not sure what the question's in here, but the concept is something that we've talked about. We saw how dynamic Ehlers, Velarde, and Scheifele was. This is Mike asking Rick the possibility of a potential swap of Connor and Ehlers from line 1 and line 2.
And then just on that point, your top two lines as you have them now, there was a time when you had Nikolai and Mark and Gabe, and that line was doing a lot of really good things. And then obviously Kyle came back. Is Nick potentially get another look at that line at some point? Or?
Yeah, that's always a possibility in games, and for sure. But we like to give Sean a good look at that position as well. Like you can't overreact and do it too quickly. You got to give it a little bit of a chance. But they'll come so that's never ruled out. But let's give it a little bit of a chance first.
From your perspective, give us the pros and cons of Ehlers and Connor playing with Scheifele. It certainly has seemed like they've leaned on this Scheifele-Connor combination, but it's hard not to think back to those games that those guys played together while Connor was out and not think that those guys did some incredible things. Maybe the best, most effective top line we've seen at any point this season.
Yeah, the version of Winnipeg's top line with Mark Scheifele, Nikolai Ehlers, and Gabriel Vilardi was one of the best lines in the NHL while they were together. They outscored their opposition 15-4. 15-4 in the stretch of play that they had at 5-on-5. That's incredible. No other Jets line has matched that kind of dominance. And it was also on the back of flow of play metrics that showed that they were creating a lot more chances than they were giving up. So there is a really exemplary go-to option available to the Jets. And that is real. I think leaving that on the table as the season gets more and more crucial or the stretch drive continues, that would be an example of offense lost or opportunity missed on the Jets' part. At the same time, I do understand that the Jets have been really hungry internally to see what that Scheifele, Connor, and Vilardi trio looks like. I know that they liked their early looks on the power play and in camp and all that sort of stuff. I know that if you talk to them about what skill set each player brings to the table, and whether that's Scheifele and Vilardi finding chemistry in the way that they protect the puck along the walls, keep their heads up. They're both fairly dangerous shooting or as passing options, real good heads up reads. They think the game in the same way. I think that's something that they want. And I think that they also like the idea of Kyle Connor finding chemistry because he's such a deadly shooter popping into soft ice. If that works, you have an extremely dangerous top line, and you have Nikolai Ehlers driving another line. And I get that. I get the appeal. If it doesn't work for a stretch, and it may not, because we have to, that Ehlers example was actually an incredible version of that top line. That was an incredible version. They may not meet that. So I guess what I'm saying is I understand the desire to look at it. If they don't go back to Ehlers in that way, if it hasn't worked, then all of those old conversations that we've had as Jets observers, is this more about their status on the team driving minutes than what results are? That's Kyle Connor as a first line left wing on days. There's more to the story to be told, I think, and it's going to depend on performance, but I can see that we've seen enough past examples of this where paying close attention to it would make a lot of sense as well.
I mean, the one option that we haven't really talked about is Scheifele, Connor, and Ehlers. And I imagine there would be time for that and potentially having Vilardi play with Monahan and Perfetti.
Yeah, I have time for that as well. We haven't seen too much of that. And again, it's another scenario where Ehlers tends to be associated with lines doing better when he's on the line than when he's off the line. So if they, as a trio, can find it, and certainly Ehlers and Connor were starting to show signs a little bit towards the leading into the break as well. Maybe it's not one or the other. I also had it pointed out to me recently that Gabriel Vilardi, during that November-December stretch where he was back from injury, he absolutely feasted in about a 5 or 6 game sample, ton of points. He decimated the Kings. That was a fun experience. And it's been a little while since then, since he's had one of those dominant offensive games. And I think because he's so shiny and exciting and new, because he showed up and absolutely crushed it for a little while, he's getting a little bit of a long lead in terms of not being thought of as an option to come off the line. So it's actually it's interesting that you're thinking of bumping him down, because you don't get a lot of discussion about that at this juncture, do you?
No, and it hadn't really been something that's been brought up quite a bit, but I mean, I have thought about it. We know what Ehlers can do. We know what Connor can do. We saw them playing together when Scheifele wasn't there. And I sort of am with you. I mean, we've seen Gabe have a lot of great games. I didn't think the Pittsburgh game was one, and I'm not overreacting from one game coming out of the All-Star break. And listen, hopefully this team lights it up tonight and they score a bunch of goals and we can kind of curb these discussions about having to change up the lines to find the offense again. But while we're living in that world right now, I think that, all of the permutations using the top players on those top lines needs to be considered, especially at an early time with a new player like Monahan coming in and sort of finding his feet. I'm not suggesting this happens tonight or Saturday, but I do think over the next couple weeks, depending on how things go in the games, it would behoove Rick Bowness to maybe see how a few of the different combinations look, because I think we can all agree offensively this team's capable of much more that they've been doing lately, and you hope Monahan brings even more potential to that top six.
Yeah, I think about all of this in terms of the playoffs. Let's say they ride these lines out as they are right here, right now, through the stretch run. They get a good playoff position, and then game 2 against Los Angeles or whoever it's going to be, the lines aren't going and they need a change. And they do look to mix things up because, the blender comes out. And they haven't had the chance to take a long look at some other combinations available to them. That's a pretty high stakes scenario to sort of throw people into the fire in that way. I agree with you that coming out of this next month or 2 months with at least a couple, with like 2 looks that get a long stretch of games, would probably add versatility and be able to create a little bit of a different look for whoever they're playing against in that first round without it being a brand new experience for the Jets. I like the idea of having like a 1A look or a 1B look, and that gives Connor Scheifele-Velarde a chance to find their chemistry. And if they don't, then it gives Winnipeg a chance to find something that works other than that before the chips are all down.
Murat, I guess speaking of focusing on the playoffs, that is a great way to segue into your latest piece at The Athletic, which is entitled "The Jets' Defense is a Strength, but the Bar is Higher for Contenders." Now that the Jets have made their move at the center position and brought in Sean Monahan, what's next for the Jets as it pertains to the trade deadline? Where do you think they're focusing in on? And do you have any intriguing names that fans might want to be thinking about, or at least Kevin Cheveldayoff might be thinking about?
Yeah, it's really interesting the degree to which Winnipeg is, in my mind, all in on this. I saw Pierre Lebrun's report that Winnipeg was in on Elias Lindholm until that trade happened and then pivoted to Sean Monahan. And believe me, I believe that. If you look at the Declan Chisholm waivers timing as well and not calling anybody up after he was claimed, there was a little bit of heat and smoke there. So I asked Kevin Cheveldayoff about that at his post-Monahan trade conference. And so there is an idea that Winnipeg is willing to shop, I guess, in some of the premier aisles of the trade market. And I think that it was telling that they went right after Monahan and acquired him that soon. It gives the Jets some time to build up remaining cap space, assess the team as they have now, and kind of point to their defense as an area for improvement. I think the number one criteria for a defensive ad for the Jets is going to be somebody who's a veteran, who's playoff tested, ideally, who kills penalties from time to time as well. For me, the premier option for that would be Chris Tanev. I think that he'd be well known to Jets fans. His connection to his brother Brenden Tanev, obvious. The fact that he played for the Manitoba Moose for a short stretch a long time ago, also clear. Tanev is one of those heart and soul, block the shot, make the hit, go through whatever you need to go through to get out of the shift in good standing type of player, like his brother, to be honest, and is effective in a top 4 context. That could give Winnipeg some flexibility. I don't know if they're all in on Tanev, but that's, I think, the blue sky version. And then you look at others like Walker from Philadelphia, Lyubushkin from Anaheim. If you're looking at teams that are already out of it, I just think that Winnipeg isn't going to feel comfortable going into the playoffs with Logan Stanley as 7 and Ville Heinola as 8, or however you want to draw that up. I think they're going to look at some veterans who are a little bit more battle tested.
Yeah, we had an interesting talk with Button before we brought you on, and he had a funny crack about the Toronto media trying to diminish the value of Chris Tanev, saying he's not going to come for a second rounder. Like, I kind of think that he might be the player on the market that garners that it might surprise people what he goes for in the end because of just how many teams would love to have Chris Tanev playing some significant minute munching on their blue line come playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, don't trust my memory. I'm like fresh from hitting my head in another scenario, so I feel a little soupy today. But didn't Ben Sherratt garner a first at some point?
Yes, exactly.
So
did David Savard.
There you go. There you have it. Like, if that's the bar for those players, I don't see how Chris Tanev isn't materially more valuable to a playoff team in this season than that. So I think there is a blue sky situation of that. Would Montreal's second round pick, the one believed to be so likely so high in the second round, move the needle? Maybe, but you'd probably need a little more than that too. So we'll see. It does seem like a lot of folks are trying to connect him to Toronto at this stage, and certainly Toronto's added at past deadlines, and they believe in toughness, a la Ryan Reeves and otherwise. But yeah, that's a name to keep an eye on for sure.
Well, the Leafs certainly could use Chris Tanev. I don't think there's any doubt that when you look at that blue line and what they've been so far this year, that he would be a massive upgrade to what they have. But I think there's a lot of teams that would covet him, that would be looking at him. And to be honest, when it comes to the Leafs, I just don't think they have no second round picks, I think, for the next 3 years. So we will see on that. I guess when we're talking about any of those players, now that the Jets no longer have their first round pick, and who knows? I mean, maybe you get uber aggressive and trade one in the future. I think next year's draft is thought to be stronger than this year's. So you're probably waiting on doing anything on that. But you get into prospects. And, we just talked to Craig about Rucker McGroarty, who is, of course, over at the World Juniors. And we've seen what Rucker's done, just being on an absolute tear coming back from the World Juniors to Michigan. I know Ken said earlier that he thought it would be I think the number he's used on the show was like 90% Rucker would be signing. I know in one of your articles you had mentioned that, from talking to people around the league, they were a little less boyish on that, probably saying 50-50. Let's just assume that the Jets are able to sign Rucker, though, at the end of the year. I don't say this often about players, coming in, playing their first NHL games. I really do believe, though, that the unique package that he brings, not just in the regular season, but potentially in the playoffs, could be a guy, he could be a player that actually does make a difference for the Winnipeg Jets, not just a player that comes in and has wide eyes and gets a little bit of experience. Where are you on Rucker as a potential player for the Winnipeg Jets at some point down the stretch, but most importantly in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, if they do sign him, I think that he'll play NHL games, if not at least one, but there'll be more to that. I think that NHL play is perhaps the most important consideration for Rutger McGroarty, as I've had it laid out for me. So if they have signed him in this scenario, then he'll get at least a game to burn a year of his ELC. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the possibility of playoffs as well. I think Winnipeg is inclined to run a fairly veteran-heavy late roster where possible. The team is deep as structured, and certainly they haven't promoted, let's say, Brad Lambert or Nikita Chibrikov at different times. You'll see Dominic Toninato get those minutes and what have you. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say for sure that this is the path for McGroarty, despite his incredible season and his tremendous character, his captaincy to a gold medal shortly after a punctured lung. I mean, this is incredible stuff. It's the stuff of legend. And if you're Rutger McGroarty at this stage in your career, you probably feel like you can tackle just about anything put in front of you. You'd be going into that scenario with a lot of confidence, and I think that could be a good thing. Again, you see a lot of playoff teams over the years. If you go 4 rounds, you get heroes in a lot of different shapes and sizes and from different spots in your lineup. So if McGroarty comes into a few games in that scenario, plays on the fourth line, chips in, I don't think he's hurting you necessarily. I think that he's of that tremendous quality and probably and confidence as well to acquit himself well. I honestly think, though, that the talk of him being a playoff difference maker from where I sit today, based on how I've heard things, may be a little bit optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's all what you do when you get in there. I just know how high they are on him, and he has, the one thing that he brings that stands out no matter where he plays is that competitive nature, the energy that he brings, and he's also been able to produce at an incredibly high level as well. I don't know why I keep coming to that, and maybe we'll remember this clip in a few months that he's a guy that will come in and be, I think, a guy that just is too good and too tough to keep out of the lineup. And, we'll see. We'll see what happens on that. One thing I did want to ask you as it pertains to Rucker, for our listeners that maybe missed your piece in The Athletic, fill us in on what happens if he plays a game, like burning that year of the ELC, but how it wouldn't change a potential UFA date down the road once he starts his clock going as an NHLer.
Yeah, I mean, contractually, and even before that, I will say, once Kevin Cheveldayoff and company have their trade deadline business sorted out, expect a little bit more of a full court press from them towards McGroarty's camp, I would say, in terms of getting that contract. And again, I think that whether it works out this year or next is going to be about Winnipeg's ability to find Rutger McGroarty NHL playing time, and that could be a tough one. Now, if he plays one single game this year, it would eat up one of the 3 years of his entry-level contract. It would be as if he had played the whole season in Winnipeg, as long as he gets into one game. And so the advantage for him in that regard would be that 2 years from now, he'd get to his second contract, which might be more than the entry-level contract if he's had any success at the NHL level at all. So that's a nice little advantage in some cases. Getting out of the ELC and into your first RFA contract, there's an advantage to that. But one thing that would not start is the time towards unrestricted free agency. That still takes 7 seasons of being on the roster for approximately half the season or more, or age 25. Rutger McGroarty's unrestricted free agency date does not change if they bring him in for the tail end of the season. So if you see that, there's no risk to losing him early or earlier than expected just because he plays.
Yeah, well, that'll be something. We'll be following the Mission games a little closer as the team comes down the stretch, going into their the playoffs and a potential, trying to get back. They didn't have a great first half, and I think a big part of that was the fact that Rutger was gone for a while. Been a very different story after they've come back from the break. Murat, why don't you tease what's coming up in The Athletic for Jets fans?
Yeah, it's first off, fresh. My most recent piece talks a little bit about Brenden Dillon having switched agencies this week as well. I think that one of the other considerations in the background for Jets fans is what happens to this defense core next. What will Brenden Dillon's future be? What will Dylan DeMello's future be? And it's my understanding that part of the switch of agencies for Brenden Dillon is just to get his ducks in a row. He's open to re-signing in Winnipeg. He's a big part of the locker room. He's a big part of the success the team has had, playing a top 4 role. But he's a pending unrestricted free agent. And Winnipeg is probably not going to ramp up contract discussions until after the season plays itself out. At the very least, until after the trade deadline plays itself out. But I think it's more of an off-season thing. So a player in his situation has got to get his ducks in a row and prepare for the what if I do hit the unrestricted free agency market. And so I spoke to his agent, who's also Ville Heinola's agent, as it were, and some of the quotes and the backstory is included in that piece. Next up, I started work on this today. I've been asked, it was a mailbag question originally, and I thought it was too good to sit on, too good to write a 200-word answer to. And it's, how good are the Winnipeg Jets at trading, really? Like, what happens to Jets players when they go to other teams? What happens to other fresh players when they go here? What's the analytical case? What's the points case? What happens to these guys' careers? How do you quantify Winnipeg Jets trade success? And I think it's going to be a fun one because, as we know, that Pierre-Luc Dubois blockbuster, or across that I'll call it the Gabriel Vilardi blockbuster, is one of the huge drivers in Winnipeg's success right now. Nemesnikov, Niederreiter, half of Winnipeg's top 4, its third pairing, half of its third pairing. There's a player on every forward line who was acquired by trade. Like, this is a compelling thing. Winnipeg's gone to that well and had success there, but how good? And I think that's going to be a real fun one to dig into next.
Cannot wait for it, folks. If you're not subscribing to The Athletic, what are you waiting for? Make sure you give Murat a follow on Twitter as well. Murat, enjoy the game. Have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon.
Huss, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. There's Murat Atesh. Great stuff as always. All right. We do have some more to get to on the program. I do have to remind you, gang, though, that the big game is on Sunday. And if you're like me, riding with the Chiefs, or you're a Niner fan, you're going to a party and you want to be rocking the colors of your home team, get on over to Royal Sports right now. They've had tons of last-minute arrivals for the Super Bowl for both teams. I did check out the Chiefs section a couple days ago. Lots of cool new stuff. Some Travis Kelce hoodies in there. Lots of T-shirts, short sleeve, long sleeve tees as well. Some great stuff for women. And obviously, you know that whatever the team you're cheering for, Royal Sports has you completely covered with NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, the biggest Jets section in town, and tons of Blue Bomber gear as well. While you're there, check out all their skates. If we can ever skate outside at any point this winter. Of course, the massive hockey section, and tons of great stuff on the King's Skate, Snow, and Surf side, including shoes, sandals, straw hats, sunglasses, Yeti mugs. If you're going on a vacation, might be a great place to pop by as well. Check them out on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And you can always pop down and see him in person, 750 Pembina Highway. Great night tonight to get out to your local Boston Pizza because the Jets are back in action. 6 o'clock puck drop. Get there a little early and order on the happy hour menu, which is always going from 3 to 6 every day. The game on the big screen with big sound, ice cold schooners, world famous BP wings, gourmet pizza. Sounds like a plan. Make it Boston Pizza tonight. And if you are staying at home, you can always get the great taste of Boston Pizza by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. And hey, speaking of the big game on Sunday, I'm not sure what you're making food-wise, but if you're going to be having a few beers, make it Winnipeg's finest Little Brown Jug. You can pop by the brewery and tap room down on William Avenue and try all of your favorites and pick up not only the beers, but some great merchandise. But if you're at your local beer store or the liquor marts over the next couple days in advance of Sunday, make sure to pick up Little Brown Jug Generic Lager, a light, crisp, domestic-tasting beer brewed locally here in Winnipeg, and it's on for a great deal right now, $19.99 for an 8-pack of Tall Boys for Generic, my personal favorite. And don't forget, if you're at the game on Saturday, you can also get Little Brown Jug at Craft Beer Corner, section 124, downstairs at Craft Beer Corner in the lower bowl, and outside section 310 at Craft Beer Corner in the upper bowl. Big thanks to Little Brown Jug for their support of WST, and make sure you stock up for the big game on Sunday. All right, we still got to get to the Coolbet lines and do a little bit more for tonight's game. See what the Jets' goal-scoring props are. How about just to score a goal? We'll look forward to that. LB and net tonight. But before we do that, let's welcome in a friend from Sport Manitoba for another It Takes a Community to Play segment brought to you by Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. All right, it's time for another It Takes a Community to Play segment with Sport Manitoba, proudly supported by Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome in Carreira Lamoureux from the Manitoba Aboriginal Sport and Rec Center. Carreira, welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. It's nice outside. Well, obviously we need the Jets to get back in the win column soon, but been a great week. Teddy Allen's back. Your neighbor down the street at Sport Manitoba and the Sea Bears. Teddy Allen's back. Big week for the Bombers. So, all in all, cannot complain. But it's great to have you on, and I think people will be really interested about this to learn more about the North American Indigenous Games in Manitoba and our involvement in it here. But you guys have actually put together a book called The Summer of Excellence, which I understand is the second time about Manitoba's involvement and some real great success stories at the NAG event. Tell us a little bit about the book and how it all came together.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a wild summer for us. We hosted the National Aboriginal Hockey Championships in the spring of 2023. And then about 6 weeks later, we sent a contingent of 500 or so athletes, coaches, all the way to Halifax to then participate in the North American Indigenous Games. And so With such an immense representation of Indigenous athletes, coaches, volunteers in the world of sport from this province, we needed to ensure their stories were documented. And the biggest thing is we didn't want these stories to be left untold and not remembered. We wanted them to exist in some form in public record so that we can share and celebrate all of these incredible athletes and coaches forever, essentially.
You know, I mean, just on the hockey event, I checked some of it out. It was, it sounded like it was a huge success, but a really, really big event. I mean, fill us in a little bit on that hockey event in particular, and you know how important that was to Aboriginal sport, youth Aboriginal sport, but also the way Winnipeg was able to host it in the fashion that it did.
Yes. So having Winnipeg host it, first and foremost, was crucial because of accessibility. So it's not just about having these athletes participate in a tournament or a championship in which no one can watch, but instead we had tickets and we opened it up to schools and to tours because we want to elevate and empower Indigenous athletes in sport, whether it's hockey or basketball or softball, irrelevant. However, at the particular level of the NAC, it is elite, it is competitive, and it is incredible. Time and time again, we get to watch the best Indigenous hockey players from across this country participate in a championship of this nature. Truly special.
How I was interested in how the teams were made and how they came from, because obviously we've got Indigenous people and Aboriginal people from, you know, across the country. How did it work for teams to come in, and was it more from communities, or did provinces take their best Aboriginal hockey players and put them together for a head-to-head?
Yes, that's a great question. So I can't speak for every province because every province does something a little bit differently. However, for Team Manitoba, we begin with an identification camp early in the summer. We just want to create a space where as many athletes that are identified and able to play at this level come out and they experience what the NAC could then be like within the confines of this camp. From there, additional athletes are then selected for a further tryout process. And it's through this process that athletes are then identified and named to the roster. And athletes come from across the province, not just from Winnipeg, not just from, prep schools or those kinds of things, but from wherever they might exist. They're permitted and welcome to come and given the same opportunity to try out.
Well, and I imagine from your end, I mean, with this, and whether we're talking about the hockey championships or all the other sports that are competed at the national games, a big part of the mandate is to provide opportunities to young athletes. I imagine, considering how big our province is and where some of these communities are, that's got to be one of the biggest challenges to reach everybody and be able to provide those chances to participate and be part of these special events.
Yes, absolutely. And I also want to be clear that it is always a work in progress. And we never finish a year and think to ourselves, got it, we did it to perfection. It's never like that. Instead, it's about, let's try this. Let's go to these different locations across this province and see if they are then accessible enough for our athletes. And at the end, if we receive feedback that we did not do our due diligence, then we just have to keep trying, because it's not just about the MESRC making determinations or decisions at the cost and expense of these athletes, but rather about working jointly with the community to hear them so that those young athletes do then get the opportunity they desire.
So the book is The Summer of Excellence, and I mean, it talks about the hockey championships, but also gets into the North American Indigenous Games. And I mean, you mentioned 500 heading out. Tell us a little about the scope of this event, and for the people participating, how much of a highlight that is of the year and, their athletic careers in a lot of cases.
Yes. So first of all, this process is super amazing. I, as a basketball official, was given the privilege of officiating at NAG. And so I got to sort of serve jointly in the games in a little bit of a different capacity than normal. However, I got to meet so many incredible athletes from Team Manitoba who said it was the experience of a lifetime. Representing your province, wearing your colors, donning them at a games in which you were facing teams from New York or Wisconsin or New Mexico. And that's really what we tried to capture in this book. It is that positive, exciting, memorable experience. And we wanted to do so through as many pictures as possible. Less words and more like sharing that. Pictures worth 1,000 words, right? We talk about that all the time.
Carreira, I mean, I guess you mentioned that you want to tell these stories. In a lot of ways, the book not only celebrates the athletes and the event itself, but I'd imagine hopefully serves as almost a recruiting tool for future athletes to be part of the events coming down the road.
100%. And I think that's ultimately the purpose, right? We want to create visibility. We want to remind everyone here that there is an entire community, populations, demographics of Indigenous youth that are so excellent and so amazing, and they deserve the opportunity to not only be celebrated, but to be selected, to be involved in decision-making processes. And we hope that this book serves not only as a celebration tool, but an educational guide.
You know, I should shout out the other team, part of the team that put this together, the other authors, Dr. Janice Forsyth, Scott Taylor, Melody Whitesell, and Gabrielle Wishart. What was your favorite part about putting together the book? And now that it's put together, when you look back at it, what sort of stands out about the project overall?
I love meeting people behind the stories. Oftentimes you interact with young athletes in particular, and you would never believe they won 5, 6 gold medals because they're so quiet and they're so humble. But then when you meet them and you have an opportunity to speak to them about something they love, like canoe kayak, for example, you get to watch them brighten up and smile and come alive. And seeing that and experiencing that over and over, hands down my favorite part.
Well, I mean, I can imagine that, you know, in events like that are so much fun, at the bottom line, I mean, it is about great experiences. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of great stories that hopefully can be inspirational moving forward as you guys, we continue to try to grow participation as well as these events overall. You know, from your perspective, with the Manitoba Aboriginal Sport and Rec Council, when we do these segments, you know, we've talked to people in different roles from a number of different sports, a number of different backgrounds, but it always comes back to the amount of people, to your point, behind the scenes that are helping the athletes, helping these events. Can you just speak to the importance of recruiting like local officials and coaches and volunteers to make events like the hockey championships and obviously NAIG, the big event happen, because it takes a lot of people pulling together to pull these things off?
Yes. So that's a great question. And I think part of the reason that perhaps people are hesitant to get involved or simply unaware is because of the way in which we celebrate the athlete. There's nothing wrong with that. Athletes deserve their time and place. But what we forget is that the backbone of many of these events is the nameless volunteers that we don't see, waking up at 4 a.m., leaving the venue at 2 a.m. to ensure that these events operate smoothly so athletes have a venue to participate and demonstrate their talent and skill. So as a basketball official myself who recognizes the need for basketball officials, I would say simply give it a try. If you're looking for other ways to be involved in the sport, to stay connected to something that you love, to watch someone or maybe your kid play, referee. Why not? Why not volunteer? Why not coach? Be impactful and intentional in your involvement in sport, and you'll feel so gratified and so thankful as you continue.
Carreira, this has been a great conversation. Fill people in on where they can find out more about the council, as well as Summer of Excellence, the book, if they want to find out more about these great stories of the Indigenous athletes representing our province.
Absolutely. You can learn more about who we are as the MASRC in Winnipeg and a Summer of Excellence by logging on to our website at www.masrc.com.
Carreira, a real pleasure meeting you, and a continued success with all the programs, and congratulations to the athletes that are celebrated in this book.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you well.
Great stuff. That's another edition of Takes a Community to Play with Sport Manitoba, proudly sponsored and supported by Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. All right, great stuff. Thanks again to Carreira for jumping on. Really enjoyed that conversation. All right, hey, tough look for Larry TSG. He bounced. Our resident grump didn't want to hear about the Super Bowl or anything, but that means he's also going to miss. He probably is not into wrestling anyways. But hey, for those of you that are with us right now, stick around in just a couple minutes. We're going to do a little impromptu giveaway on WST because, as we mentioned, we've got some AEW tickets to give away. I cannot wait. April 10th, AEW coming back to Winnipeg, and hopefully Kenny Omega, Winnipeg star, will be back. He was recovering from diverticulitis, which was quite serious. I don't think he's been back on TV But April 10th is the date. Anyone that went to the show last time, I'm sure will be back at it. It was so much fun. Tickets are available now at Ticketmaster. But it's a good reminder to sign up for the WST mailing list, because not only do we have some AEW tickets to give away, which we'll do through there, we also have some Moose tickets, which will be given away. There's a bunch of home games in February. So if you haven't already, sign up for the mailing list. There is a link right here in the stream, in the chat right now. You can see, click on that. Make sure you're getting the notices. We don't put out tons out, but we do a lot of great prizing, and we want to make sure podcast listeners are able to get in on those as well that aren't with us on YouTube. But the Wheel of Winners is going to be back in just a second. We will let you know how to enter in a minute. Hey, I got to thank our friends at Aikens Lake for their support of WST. It feels like spring right now, although now actually I guess we do have snow. But listen, planning is well underway for the 2024 season at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, and dates are being booked as we speak. If you're thinking about an incredible fly-in fishing experience where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens is the spot. Incredible world-class fishing and incredible world-class hospitality from the Aikens team. There really is nothing like Aikens Lake. Find out more online at aikenslake.com or check out their socials at Aikens Lake on X and Instagram. All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines before we do our AEW giveaway. And I know we got into some Super Bowl props today on the Lock Shop. We'll have our best bets tomorrow for the game. The line, same as it's been from yesterday, plus 110 for the Chiefs on the money line, minus 123 on the Niners. And the Niners are 2-point favorites in the game. The total, 47.5. If you saw Chris Meany on the show yesterday, who is about as sharp as they come, their projections are leaning to the under. I think I'm going to lean to the under as well. And I think you all know who I'm picking for the game on Sunday. As far as tonight goes in the NHL, 7 games. The Canucks are in Boston to take on the Bruins. Vancouver with that impressive win in Carolina. And in coming back off the break, and the Bruins coming off a loss at home to Calgary. Boston's minus 131 faves, the Canucks plus 112. The Avalanche move on to Carolina to take on the Hurricanes. Canes minus 140 faves, Avs plus 119 on the road. The Panthers are a big minus 267 favorite against Washington. The Devils get Jack Hughes back tonight. That's a big addition for New Jersey. They're minus 135 favorites at home against Calgary, who are plus 115. The Lightning, plus 118 underdogs. They played last night. They're staying in New York. They got the Islanders tonight, who were minus 139. And the late game tonight is the Vegas Golden Knights, coming off the streak-breaking win of the Edmonton Oilers, minus 133 on the road in Arizona, take on the Coyotes. Coyotes plus 113. And then there's the Jets and Flyers. Jets are minus 138 favorites in this one. LB and net. Flyers plus 117 home dogs in this game. The total is 5.5. The team totals for Philly, if you like the under 2.5 is minus 119. And if you've been waiting for the Jets to have a bit of an offensive explosion, over 2.5 is minus 149. Over 3.5 is plus 159. Jets definitely owe Philly a few goals, considering that Urson shut them out here in Winnipeg a couple weeks ago. As far as goal scorers tonight for the Jets, KFC's plus 175. Gabriel Velarde is plus 235. Ehlers plus 235. Scheifele plus 235. Other players on the list, Cole Perfetti plus 365. Sean Monahan plus 400, along with Nino Niederreiter at plus 400, and Alex Iafallo plus 460. It's all there at Coolbet. If you haven't played a Coolbet before and you would like to, or you're thinking about getting in for the Super Bowl, use the promo code WST when you make your first deposit. Hook you up with a 100% bonus up to $200 on that first deposit. All right. Remo, everyone's going to be signing up for the mailing list so they can get in on the AEW tickets. But I figured let's reward one of our listeners and live YouTube viewers that's hanging around to the end to come and join Mary Jane, who won Beat the Box Office. She's already going, as well as Stephen Sherwood, who won right off the bat with the Beat the Box Office giveaways. What are we going to do? Exclamation mark tickets in the chat?
Yeah, exclamation mark tickets in the chat. And that is live right now. So do that. And if you're listening on the podcast and you want to get on later, we do have some Moose tickets on our website live right now. We're giving away winnipegsportstalk.com/contest. And that'll take you right there. And you go to winnipegsportstalk.com, scroll to the bottom, sign up for the mailing list, and we'll let you know when we have more stuff to give away. And also, hey, if you missed anything on the show, we send out a weekly newsletter just highlighting some of the top conversations of the week. If you want to, go back, if you missed yesterday, Teddy Allen from the Winnipeg Sea Bears came on for a great conversation, and we talked about Brady Oliveira with John Hodge, him and Dalton Schoen signing. And I actually saw this, Huss. We clipped us reading the alarm for all the signings. Breaking news: Brady Oliveira liked one of the Winnipeg Sports Talk tweets. So we see you out there, Brady, liking our content. So, really exciting week for the Bombers and Seabears as well, bringing back some great players.
Brady also liked my tweet, giving it to that complete loser in Hamilton that tried to take a shot at the privilege cliche of some guy doing charity work on his holiday in Bali. But anyways, yeah, appreciate you, Brady, and glad that you're back for a couple weeks. T. Will asking when AEW is. AEW is April 10th, Canada Life Center. And Mary Jane said, yes, she'd like some company from the WST crew when she's there with her son. We'll look forward to seeing everyone there. Remo and I will be there. It is going to be a lot of fun. So yes, if you do want to get in on the tickets right now, exclamation mark tickets, and we'll give you about another minute, and then we'll wrap it up. One thing I know, Remo, we both wanted to quickly touch on was some more terrible news in the industry today. It is just about 3 years to the day that our beloved station 1290 was shut down in the middle of the day. Coming back the day after, I had to eat it after the Chiefs lost to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. Never got a chance to get back on the air after that one, but obviously we pivoted quickly. And we've been enjoying great success here in this format in the digital place with the podcast and with the show. We're so appreciative of everyone that has supported and all the new people that have been coming throughout. By the way, if you are new, welcome aboard. Hit that subscribe button and hit the thumbs up while you're at it. But it just seems like this is an annual thing. That in the news today, that Bell, our former employer, is cutting another 9% of their workforce. They have sold a bunch of stations, which hopefully live on under some ownership that actually cares about the medium and about the product and about local broadcasting. But it's another really, really dark day in Canadian media right now. So from my perspective, I mean, whatever. We've said what we have to say about our old employer and what they're doing and how they're going about it. It is what it is. But wishing everybody the best moving forward. There's a lot of great people that had their lives turned upside down today. Excuse me, a lot of their lives turned upside down today. And we've been there. We're feeling for you. And Rima, I'm sure you echo those comments.
Yeah, it's coming up on 3 years, which is really hard to believe. And, you think because of some of the backlash that was received, maybe the way they're going about it would be done differently. But really just bringing people to the execution line and, sending them home. I feel for all the employees, and, I feel very fortunate and lucky that we've been able to pivot and do this, because I probably wouldn't be in media if we didn't. So
back to accounting?
No, I wouldn't be doing that. Something else. But I'm not really sure what else needs to be said. It is, I will say that it is disappointing that they have had this great message in the past of, mental health and all that, and the big campaign that was so successful for so long, that's kind of been torpedoed by these actions. Like they had it at the end of January, and it, I think did start a lot of positive conversations and change about, perceptions on, mental health and getting help. And, you didn't even see it this year. People don't want to support them anymore. And, just the tradition seems, we're going to have this great campaign for mental health and then just shatter, tons of lives going forward. So, that's just my thoughts on that. But as far as us, we're here 3 years almost. It's been quite a ride, and we're so appreciative of the support. And we have gotten messages from people say, "Hey, how can we continue to support you guys?" Just things like hitting the thumbs up button on our videos, leaving a comment after, staying in touch with the mailing list. We said we're on all the social medias: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. Just interacting with our content and that kind of stuff tells the algorithms, hey, we're putting out great stuff, and we'll show it to more people if, the YouTube algorithm knows that we're putting out great content by you watching or liking, subscribing, commenting, all that. So we were so appreciative of all the support out there, but it just seems like this is just a cycle that keeps going on. And, a lot of people, listen, big part of their day, the local news, and I don't know, we don't really have a lot of it anymore, and a lot of important work not getting done.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure. I believe the local newscasts at noon are done, so I'm not sure what that means locally. But to any CTV employees that have found that they're going to be doing something else, we're thinking about them. And yeah, you mentioned just the support we had from everyone, especially everyone. Shout out to the Sam Crow there, Brown Eye Girl MGD, Dan Jets fan. Everyone that's become a member of Winnipeg Sports Talk, supporting us with that $2 donation a month. It's another thing that really helps us move on. And as I said, it's been incredible 3 years. I wouldn't change a thing, but I just do know that there's so many people that have been forced into a real crossroads of their life today that weren't expecting that yesterday when they went to bed, finding out the bad news. And we wish them all well. All right, let's finish this off. Let's get some good vibes going into the game tonight and fire up somebody with a pair of AEW tickets to join us for the big event on April 10th at Canada Life Center.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, we got a bunch of... So you want me to close it now, the number of entries?
Yeah, close it now. People have had enough time.
Okay, closing it now. And we have 31 entries. So shout out to everyone who put exclamation mark tickets in. And I'm just copying them, Huss. I'm going to put them in the wheel of winners. Real exciting stuff here. I'm pumped for this AEW show. I saw, they post all the highlights on social media. Sting, still wrestling, took a huge dive off the top of one of the, I don't know what it is, like where the entrance is, and landed on two guys. I'm like, Sting, man, he's still going straight. He's got to be 60 years old, right?
You know what? I caught a bit of Dynamite last night, and he and Darby Allin won the tag team titles. And then afterwards, he had his sons at ringside just because he's retiring soon. And then his sons came out to celebrate with him. And then a bunch of guys came out and beat the hell out of all of them, including his family. So that will heat up. Getting closer to our event in Winnipeg on April the 10th. Again, tickets on sale at Ticketmaster. Check that out and stay tuned to Winnipeg Sports Talk to win, as well as a special contest potentially to get you sitting on the floor for the big event on the 10th of April.
64 years old, 65, Sting, still putting his body on the line. Yeah, I don't know. Someone's got to step in there. I got worried about the guy, but I guess they're like glorified stuntman. I don't know.
That's for sure. Well, and again, he's already said that his final match is coming up. I can't remember the date. Yeah. But I guess they maybe give him a little run with the belts before he goes off. All right, everybody that's in, good luck. If you win, and we'll announce the winner second when we see the spin, what we're going to need you to do is send us your email at winnipegsportstalk.com so we can send you the tickets. Of course, the tickets, like everything nowadays, are digital. All right, thanks to everyone that entered. the wheel of winners for 2 tickets to AEW Dynamite April 10th at Canada Life Center. Give it a spin, Remo. See who we're taking to the show.
All right, here we go.
It's your boy Bruce. He's going to be fired up. He is going to be fired up. I believe he is a great fan of the art of sports entertainment. And Bruce, we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun that night. Congratulations to Bruce. So Bruce, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com, just to make sure we've got your email. We probably do already, but just to be sure. And count yourself in. Book it off. April 10th for AEW with the WST crew. Reem, before we go, how you feeling about this game tonight?
I got to be honest. I'm surprised the Jets are favorites, which is on the road, the way that it's been going. But is the sportsbook still looking at the record? I don't know. Maybe I feel better if they were an underdog. They're due for some goals here, right?
Yes. Like that's what I want to see tonight. You know what? I might even jump on that over 3.5 tonight.
You think they're due for an explosion?
Like not going on individual goal scorers. Like let's see the team come together. They owe Philly for that shutout loss here earlier. They're getting back at Urson. LB's going to come in and be ready to go and hopefully have a real strong game. So let's end this streak, get a win, get the vibes going for a Friday show heading into a return bout against the Pittsburgh Penguins Saturday night at Canada Life Center.
Yeah, I got to feel good. And, one thing about the Dillon suspension, I was worried that he was going to miss the rematch against Minnesota. But no, it's this game, the Saturday game, and then the Valentine's Day game. Oh, they got a couple, so he's not missing that game. So, without Dillon tonight, Stanley in. Brossois in net. Love to see a power play goal, something. So let's see some winning the special teams battle.
Oh, a power play goal would be... Oh, that would be so nice to get on the show tomorrow and be talking about the power play actually scoring. That is definitely another hope. Over under power play goals in this game, 1.5 plus 210. I will not be taking that. Although you might, the unders minus 312, not worth betting. All right, well, that's going to do it for us. If you joined late, make sure to go back and check out the Craig Button segment. He was phenomenal. Murat, as always, was great. Thanks again to Carreira Lamoureux from Sport Manitoba coming by and joining us today for the It Takes a Community to Play segment. Congratulations to your boy Bruce for the win of the AEW tickets. I know he's fired up about the big dub. And in the meantime, join us tomorrow. I'll be around for the start of the show, and then Remo's going to take her away along with Connor. Although we will have the three of us in the first hour do a little bit of Super Bowl talk before I have to go. We want to have some final predictions from myself and Connor, who are on opposite sides of the fence for the big game tomorrow. But we will be starting it off with reaction from tonight's game in Philly. Don't forget Illegal Curve tonight, right after the program. Kenny and Rennie, support those fellas as well. And make sure to join us tomorrow on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Thanks again to all the sponsors that make this show happen every day. Everyone that was in for a big show live on YouTube, and all the podcast listeners. Have a great one tonight. And fingers crossed, we'll be talking about a one-game winning streak tomorrow on the program. We'll find out tonight when the puck drops in Philly just after 6 p.m. Have a great one, everyone.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.